The sun had barely risen over the dusty little town of Dry Creek when the crowd began to gather. The morning air was thick with shame and whispers. At the center of the town square stood a wooden post, weathered, splintered, and stained with stories of humiliation. Tied to it was a young woman, her face streaked with tears and dust, her wrists raw from the tight rope biting into her skin. "Please, please let me go," she cried, her voice trembling but desperate enough to echo through the still streets. No one answered. The townsfolk stood silent, some with disgust in their eyes, others with pity they dared not express. The sheriff leaned against his office porch, chewing tobacco like this was just another day. "Thieves don't get sympathy here," he spat, his voice lazy. "You steal from folks in Dry Creek, you pay the price." But she hadn't stolen anything. At least, not in the way they thought. Her name was Clara Wren, a seamstress who came west with dreams of building a new life after her father died back east. She'd taken work sewing dresses for the ladies of the town, earning little but enough to survive. Then one day, money went missing from the general store. The owner, a bitter man with too much whiskey in his gut, accused her. And in a town like Dry Creek, a woman's word was worth less than the dust under a man's boot. She'd tried to explain, no one listened, and now she was tied there for all to see, condemned by shame she didn't deserve. Then came the sound of hooves, slow, deliberate, echoing through the morning quiet. Heads turned. A tall cowboy rode into town, dust clinging to his coat, hat low over his eyes. His horse was black as night, its mane flowing like smoke. The cowboy dismounted without a word, boots crunching against the gravel. His presence alone made the sheriff straighten. "Morning, stranger," the sheriff said carefully. "Town business here, ain't no need for." The cowboy's eyes, cold as the edge of a knife, cut him off. "Town business, huh, looks more like cruelty to me." The crowd murmured. The sheriff crossed his arms. "She's a thief, took what ain't hers." The cowboy stepped closer to Clara. She could barely look up, shame burned in her cheeks. "Is that true?" he asked quietly. She shook her head, her voice cracking. "No, sir, I swear it. I didn't take anything." The cowboy studied her face for a moment longer, then reached into his coat. He tossed a silver coin toward the sheriff. It hit the dirt at the man's boots. "There, that should cover whatever she's accused of. Untie her." The sheriff's jaw clenched. "Ain't how it works." The cowboy's hand dropped to his revolver. He didn't draw it. He didn't have to. The message was clear. "Untie her," he repeated, his voice low and dangerous. The sheriff hesitated, then motioned to one of his deputies. "Do it." As the ropes fell away, Clara nearly collapsed. The cowboy caught her before she hit the ground, his strong hands steadying her trembling body. The crowd slowly began to scatter, muttering under their breath. She looked up at him, eyes wide, voice shaking. Why would you help me?" He looked down at her, unreadable. "Because I've seen this before," he said quietly. "A lie spreads faster than truth in a town full of cowards." He helped her to the water trough by the saloon. She drank greedily, coughing as she swallowed. When she looked up again, he was still standing there, watching her carefully. "What's your name, miss?" "Clara," she whispered. "Clara Wren. Name's Colt Avery," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "I was just passing through. But now I reckon I ain't in such a hurry." That evening, the town seemed to hold its breath. People whispered about the stranger who'd stood up to the sheriff, about the girl who'd been freed. Some said he was an outlaw. Others claimed he'd once been a lawman turned bitter by betrayal. Whatever the truth, Colt Avery didn't seem to care what they thought. He found Clara sitting by the small church at the edge of town, staring at the horizon. "You should keep writing," she said softly when she saw him. "People here don't forget. They'll come for me again." He leaned against the fence post, eyes narrowed against the setting sun. "Let him. I've faced worse." She looked at him then, really looked. There was something in his face, a sadness behind the steel. "Why do you really help me?" she asked. He was silent for a long time before answering. "Because once, I didn't." Her brow furrowed. He sighed, staring into the distance. "There was a girl, back in Abilene, accused of the same thing. I was deputy then, believed the sheriff when he said she was guilty. She begged me to listen. I didn't. They hanged her by morning. Later, we found out the real thief was his own son." Clara's throat tightened. "I left that badge in the dirt," he continued. "Swore I'd never stand by again. The silence between them carried a weight neither could break. Over the next few days, he stayed in town, fixing the blacksmith's gate, helping old folks carry hay, quiet but always near Clara. The townsfolk's whispers turned to grudging respect. The sheriff, though, watched from afar, his pride festering like a wound. One night, a storm rolled in. Thunder cracked across the plains, and rain hit the rooftops like stones. Clara was in her small sewing shop, packing up what little she owned. She'd planned to leave before sunrise, go where no one knew her name. Then the door burst open. The sheriff stepped in, gun drawn, his face red with whiskey and fury. "You think you can just walk free, you little liar," he growled. "That cowboy of yours made me a fool. You're gonna fix that tonight." Clara stumbled back, heart pounding. "I didn't steal anything." He cocked his gun. "I don't care." Then a voice came from behind him, calm, steady, lethal. "I care." Colt Avery stood in the doorway, drenched from the rain, revolver leveled. The sheriff froze. "You got no right, stranger." "I've got enough," Colt said, stepping forward. "Put it down." The sheriff sneered. "She's guilty." "No," Colt said, eyes hard as flint. "You are." Lightning flashed. The next instant, 2 gunshots split the air. When the thunder faded, the sheriff lay on the floor, his gun still smoking beside him. Colt's side was bleeding, but he stood tall. Clara ran to him, hands trembling as she pressed against the wound. Why'd you do that?" she cried, tears mixing with the rain. He winced, but smiled faintly. "Because I wasn't gonna fail again." The rain washed the blood from his hands as he staggered out of the shop, the storm howling around them. The sheriff's body was left behind, proof of a coward's end. By dawn, the storm had passed. Colt lay on the porch of the church, pale but breathing. Clara sat beside him, holding his hand, praying silently. When his eyes finally opened, she smiled through tears. "You're still here," he smirked weakly. "Takes more than one bullet to send me packing." She laughed, a soft, broken sound that felt like hope. Weeks passed. The sheriff's deputy left town, and Dry Creek slowly began to heal. People stopped whispering. Clara reopened her shop, and the cowboy who had once been just a stranger became her silent guardian. Sometimes, folks would see them riding out past the hills together, her hair flying in the wind, his hat tilted low, 2 souls scarred by the same world but walking towards something better. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mesas, Clara looked over at him and said, "Colt, that day you untied me. You asked me something." I never answered. He smiled faintly. "I asked if you were ready to start over." She nodded. "I am now." The wind carried her words across the plains, soft but sure. And somewhere in that lonely western horizon, where guilt and grace meet, the story of the shamed girl and the cowboy who saved her became a whisper. One that the wind of Dry Creek would carry for years to come. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing a man can do is show mercy.